Saints Falcons. Going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. All right, so first thing, let's get into the picks real quick. We got Saints at Falcons. Saints favored by 3 on the road, and the over/under set at 46. So I'm gonna start this off. I don't actually think this game is worth betting on. There are things, advantages you could look for on either side. I'm gonna walk through in a little bit here, but I'm gonna land on actually the side of Falcons +3, and it's like I said, it's not something I would bet on or include in like what I do generally with like parlays and stuff. But that is the side I would end up on, as well as the Falcons money line, of course, given that scenario. And then I would also, I mean, I'll default to the over 46 because it is in a dome, and there are paths for both these teams to score. But that is a complete stay away as far as I'm concerned. The over under on this game, absolutely not. I ain't touching that shit at all. But yeah, so Falcons +3 I think is the only place that's even worth putting money on in this game. But stick around and I'll tell you how and why that's how it go down. So first up, we got Saints offense versus Falcons defense. Injuries. So starting Saints left tackle Teron Armstead still on the COVID list, so you're not gonna play this game. Other than that, Marquez Callaway is out. I don't care. He's backup receiver. And on the Falcons side, Dante Fowler list is questionable. I actually hope for the Falcons' sake he doesn't play, to be honest with you, because he would not be useful in this game. And then also Kendall Sheffield list is questionable, which is maybe the same thing. Two not good players, at least in this matchup. So you talk about the offensive line versus the defensive line for the run game here. So let's get it straight. So the Falcons are still soft on the interior. That Raiders game last week got real out of hand pretty quick, and that limited the Raiders' ability to even functionally run the ball, as well as they had their own injuries in the offensive line. But here you're going to see, I mean, Tyler Davison is really, really bad nose tackle. He cannot hold the point. So he can't. He doesn't do anything that is helpful for defense. Grady Jarrett, I have a ton of respect for. I think he's really, really good. I think he's the second, tied for the second best defensive tackle in the NFL with Chris Jones. But he still is weak against like power rushing teams, and you're going to see that here to a point. I actually don't think the Saints at this point. So they're running out. Cesar Ruiz, I would guess, Eric McCoy, and then Andres Pete, who I think is going to be back this week. I had to check for some reason. I thought he might have been hurt long term. He had a concussion. He was out with a concussion last week, so Nick Eason started in his place. But yeah, I'm going to roll with Andres Pete. And then their tackles probably just real quick. Ryan Ramczyk, and then Teron Armstead, like I said, out still, so it'll be James Hurst again at left tackle. I'll talk about him. So yeah, on the interior, like I said, there's gonna be some push, but without Andres, or sorry, without Teron Armstead pushing on the edges, right, and helping around there, I actually don't think they're gonna go as crazy as you've seen them versus other teams. Now, again, the Falcons' defensive interior is soft as hell, but I think the Saints might not dominate them the way maybe it looks like on paper they would. So then on the edges, Ryan Ramczyk is a beast. He was a monster, best tackle in the NFL. Don't hold me to that off the top of my head that I could think of. Um, but the other side, James Hurst, right? So he actually, I thought he was pretty decent in his first game there with the Broncos. But I'm going to point out that he only has to run block, right? So it's still to be seen how he is as a pass protector. And B, the Broncos edge defenders are not very good. They're not the worst in the NFL, but they're not super good. Now that applies here too. Falcons edges are bad. Um, so Jacob Mariner, right? He was the NFC Defensive Player of the Week last week. That was some random shit that happened in his favor. You can take lessons away from that. I will not, because he has not been good at any other point in the season, or really even in that game. Like I said, it was just a couple plays that, and whoever was on that edge was going to end up making that play likely anyway. So yeah, in terms of push, I mean they're going to be able to push the Ryan Ramczyk edge like and control that very well. There's no one that can deal with him on the Falcons. But on the other one, I mean James Hurst, like I say, he was all right, but he wasn't anything crazy. And there, I actually think you're going to get into a little bit of more neutral scenario with Stephen Means, Twilty Mariner, maybe Alan Bailey, whoever they throw out there. So the second level, now this one's interesting, right? Because you saw 2 weeks ago when these two teams played that the Saints did kind of end up running them over, but that was because they had so many chances on offense. I mean, they only got to 24 points, right? And that's mostly a function of the Falcons' offense being so trash in that game. And there's a reason for it because the Falcons linebackers, so they're solid. I'm not gonna call it solid. They're weak, right? In terms of not like if they get if there's like a guard buried down on them, they're gonna struggle to shed the block and make a play. But they're really fast sideline to sideline. And when you get in a game like this where they're super overplaying the run because of Taysom Hill at quarterback, they're going to be like legitimately useful. I do think there's going to be plays where they get kind of washed out pretty notably, but I do think they're going to make a decent amount of flash plays too, like they did in the other Saints game. They were good in that game too. And yeah, without Teron Armstead, even in this game, the Saints are even worse at the second level. Normally they're pretty good, and here they're not awful. I mean, Ryan Ramczyk is a beast there, and Eric McCoy is reasonable too. But I actually think the Falcons linebacker should be okay. So then you talk about the overall run game, and it's gonna be good. Like, don't get me wrong, the Saints can really run the ball. They scheme pretty well, and like I said, between their interior and Ryan Ramczyk, there's paths for them to move the line of scrimmage here. But I don't think it's gonna be dominant. Um, Same way, I mean, you saw the last 2 weeks, even against the Broncos, that they scored so many points again because of how bad the opposing offense was. And here, I don't think they're going to be dominant consistently. I think it'll be good for sure, but they're not going to like go crazy, crazy. So then you talk about the pass game. So first, pass rush remains to be seen. Like I mentioned, I mean, we'll see how much the Saints even throw the ball, but I suspect once I get to the Falcons, they're probably going to have to some. And I don't know about James Hurst yet. Like I said, he didn't really notably have issues outside of some, first game stuff like miscommunication, which is possible here too. But there's nothing worrying like technique, athleticism wise that I saw. So we'll see. But the Falcons' edge rushers are bad. I mean, if Dante Fowler plays, he's actually a reasonable like straight line speed rusher, but I'm not worried about him really. And then on the other edge, like I said, Tuotu Mariner is not a real pass rusher, not really useful. Charles Harris actually like tiny flashes, but I'm not gonna even really consider him as a positive. Same with Steven Means. Actually, they're similar as pass rushers. So we'll see. And I think Ryan Ramczyk is going to be effectively completely clean this game. There's no one that can stand up to him on the Falcons. So then you talk about the receivers. Now here, listen, this is a fucking bloodbath. Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are both really good, and especially Michael Thomas, incredible. And they are going to fucking kill the Falcons corners. I mean, Isaiah Oliver and AJ Terrell. So I like AJ Terrell. I think he's been good this year, but he cannot deal with these players. They're way too good. And Isaiah Oliver's awful. And I mean, Jesus Christ, he's gonna get roasted consistently. Now in the slot, I think Darqueze Dennard is okay, and I actually think he can reasonably touch Traquan Smith. Problem being, of course, the Saints move their receivers around. They don't always run him out in the slot. It'll be Mike Thomas and Sanders some, and both of them can roast Darqueze Dennard too. So you're going to run into a lot of issues there. Now, as far as Jared Cook goes, I will mention that he might get shut out again. I mean, the Falcon linebackers are like ready made to shut him down because he needs speed mismatches. He doesn't exercise size mismatches all that well. He's okay, but yeah, like I said, I think the top two receivers are gonna, boy. So then you talk about the quarterback versus the defense. Taysom Hill's bad as a passer, right? I mean, we've seen now. Sure, it's only been 2 games, but I'm more than comfortable just making a ruling about that at this point that he's a bad passer. But listen, I mean, the tools are here for him to be decent. When you get the mismatches like he's going to have a receiver in this game, it's hard for me to say he's going to be awful. It's basically impossible because I mean it's only so hard to throw whatever the meme the Michael Thomas slant, but it's true. I mean it's only so hard to throw that as a quarterback, and whether it's just any basic routes, any choice route that Manuel Sanders run is going to be open basically, and you're going to see that they're really going to buoy Taysom Hill's production. He's still going to be bad, especially down the field, and I'm not going to overrate the ability of the Saints receivers, especially down the field, because both of them do kind of run into more issues there, especially given who's throwing them the ball in this scenario. So then you talk about the overall pass game. Yeah, I think it's going to be okay, right? Because the receivers are so good, but you can't skip the quarterback step. That's by far the most important, and we're talking about a bad quarterback, right? And no matter how good you give a scenario to a bad quarterback, they can only do so much with it generally. Now there are exceptions to that, but Taysom is not one of them. And I do think his rushing helps for sure, but the linebackers in this case actually limit that. The Falcons really fast linebackers. So yeah, it's going to be there, and the receivers can make plays, but not a ton of chunk to plays down the field, not a ton of useful deep shots. It's not going to look all that good. And then you talk about yeah, and then the red zone though, I think they're going to be a little bit better. Um, because their Alvin Kamara really, of course, really helps in the red zone. And actually, the Saints' offensive scheme in the red zone is really good. Taysom Hill being able to run there, and I think they can actually maybe run over the Falcons a little bit in the red zone. But I'm not going to overrate it because you're still talking about a bad quarterback. I'm not going to go all the way. Like, it's not like they were crazy against the Falcons literally 2 weeks ago. So I have them at a point spread of 17-24. Honestly, though, that's not as like concrete as I feel in other games. I could see both sides of this argument in terms of them being like worse than this, especially if they get down and they have to throw a lot. Or I could see them being better than that if James Hurst is like for real as a run blocker and then kind of just running over the Falcons to a point. But really, I think 20 getting past 24 is just going to be really unlikely without like defensive score or something like that. So then you talk about the Falcons offense versus the Saints defense. So injury wise, um, James Carpenter out for the Falcons, starting guard. Matt Hisley's probably going to play, which I'm curious about. I wanted every time I've seen him, I think he's been okay. I think he might be pretty decent in the long run. I don't know about this game, but I'm just curious about that. Julio Jones is questionable. I think I'm going to go ahead and assume he's playing based on all the stuff I've seen. Um, but that's although I don't know if that's a huge deal in this game. Todd Gurley also I think questionable. Don't care even a little bit. The more important ones though. So Marcus Davenport out for the Saints defensive end. That's kind of whatever. But Janoris Jenkins out. Janoris Jenkins is pretty good, and his backups are fucking awful. Patrick Robinson is at least like marginal, but he's questionable himself. And if PJ Williams gets in this game, so I talk every so often about corners who are just awful, awful, awful. PJ Williams, I think, is the second worst. Tony McRae is the worst. The lines back, he's on IR, I think now, but like third string slot corner, the worst. PJ Williams is probably the second worst. That guy's awful. Every time he's ever on the field, he is constantly the cause of the other team being successful. I mean, constantly. So I'm going to get into how that's going to play out, but just keep that in mind. So then you talk about the offensive line versus defensive line, so the run game. And here it's not going to be very good for the Falcons. I mean, I actually like their offensive line. I think if they move to some type of to stretch zone scheme, their offensive line would look like pretty good. But they still don't. They still have a dumb offensive running scheme. So you're going to see that they're going to struggle to push up front. Matt Hennessy is more of an athlete than a bigger guard, and with the Saints defensive tackles being legitimately good, there's not going to be a lot there. On the edges, even so normally I actually like the Falcons tackles, especially in the run game. But Cameron Jordan really like extremely good run defending edge, and Trey Hendrickson's okay on the other side. I don't want to go crazy on him, but I think he's a run defender. He's at least disciplined and he knows what he's doing. Caleb McGarry though, I love as a run blocker. His potential or what he shows, I don't really believe in the concept of potential, but like he does some really good things at times, especially down the field. At the line of scrimmage though, I just think all around you're not talking about a ton. So then you talk about the second level, Saints linebackers good, but K'Wan Alexander can get notably out of position at times. And I just want to mention that. I don't really care here. I think he's going to be fine, but not a ton because the Falcons O-line, while they actually are good at the second level generally, are just going to struggle to get past the line of scrimmage at this point. So the overall run game, yeah, just mediocre. Falcons aren't very good at running the ball generally, and here they just don't have advantages at the line of scrimmage. Although I think there might be some flashes, I just don't see it. So then you talk about the pass rush. So we're getting to the pass game. Hey, here, so on the interior, there might be a little bit. I mean, David Onyemata does flash sometimes. I mean, that game he had against the Buccaneers was nuts, but that was because the Bucks had a backup guard in there who was like really bad. Who's the natural tackle was Joe Haig. Here, I don't really see it with him or any of their interior players. There's gonna be some like pocket push, but nothing I really care about. On the edges, Cameron Jordan should be pretty good in this game, especially versus Cale McGarry. Cale McGarry definitely still has issues in pass pro. But actually, I mean, Cameron Jordan isn't like a nuts pass rusher, especially like on a down and out basis. He's definitely relevant in this game, but I don't. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna overreact to his impact. And then Trey Hendricks on the other side is whatever. I think he's pretty similar actually to like Max Crosby, who the Falcons just played last week and did not make an impact. So I'm not necessarily worried about him. It's not impossible though. I don't. He could again. McGarry's not perfect. Jake Matthews isn't perfect. The Falcons left tackle either. So you talk about the receivers. So here again, if PJ Williams is on the field, the Falcons will kill him. Any of the receivers. Calvin Ridley is really really good. I think Russell Gage. I think a lot of Russell Gage. I think he's really good. And if Julio Jones is playing, of course, like they're going to kill them. Now Marshall Lattimore actually I think is going to if Julio plays is going to like reasonably limit him and his effectiveness because Julio just he doesn't at this point separate like crazy from like elite corners, and I think you'd see that in this game. But on the other side, whoever they even if it's Patrick Robinson they throw cannot keep up with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is going to be open all the time in this game. And in the slot too, I mean Chauncey Gardner Johnson is a pretty good slot defender, but he's more of a like bigger bodied like tight end matchup guy. He could guard slot receivers too, but Russell Gage is like I'm telling you, Russell Gage is really good, and you'll see that his agility and his ability to sit in space short is actually going to be pretty effective in this game. So then you talk about the quarterback versus the defense. Matt Ryan not going to be confused or shook by anything that the Saints do defensively, but the Saints are generally good defensively. And listen, Matt Ryan, especially in this offensive scheme, they just don't move the ball well as a rule. You see it all the time, even in like the games versus the Panthers. Like even in games where they should be moving the ball well, they just don't because they just do a bunch of stupid shit, and that's going to happen here too. Um, and the pass rush is not nothing, so that's going to be limiting as well. So I don't think the Falcons are going to like you've seen versus like the Vikings and the Raiders, them go crazy, crazy. That's not going to happen here. But and also Marcus Williams, free safety for the Saints, pretty good, and he's going to help limit the like over the top, especially Calvin Ridley stuff in this game, but not crazy. So then you talk about the overall pass game, and I think it's been good. Like listen, Calvin Ridley is going to be a killer in this game in terms of being open. In terms of getting him the ball, though, like I said, Marcus Williams limiting as a deep safety. The pass rush is not nothing. We'll see, especially if Julio Jones doesn't play. But if PJ Williams is on the field, man, that raises the floor to like good for the Falcons passing offense. Although I'll be careful that again, the Falcons do a bunch of dumb shit all the time. So and then once you get to the red zone, though, that's where I see the issues because Matt Ryan just not a good red zone player. I mentioned him. He's effectively the same as Matt Stafford. They just don't make good enough decisions in the red zone. They don't make quick enough decisions for whatever reason. It is pretty notably different than how they operate in the rest of the field. And without like Kyle Shanahan, they just aren't great in the red zone, especially here where they're not going to be able to run the ball to like help that. So we'll see. I have them actually at the same point spread as the Saints, a 17-24. But them too, I mean, because you're just banking on a lot of unknowns in this game as opposed to other games. Because I mean, with the Saints offense, right? It's like they could run the fuck out of this out of the Falcons, especially if the Falcons don't go up early. And on the Falcons side of the ball, you talk about a like goofy offense who shoots themselves in the foot all the time versus the worst corner in the NFL or one of the worst in the NFL. I like I said, there's a reason that I lean the Falcons side, and it's mostly is that PJ Williams thing as well as Taysom Hill is the opposing quarterback. But it is nowhere near something I'm comfortable betting on. So I think if you're going to do anything, it's Falcons +3, getting points at home. But everything else basically stay away. So that is Saints Falcons.